So Solar Sense is a channel that we watched ages ago about the liminal spaces. Liminal spaces. I thought I'd revisit the channel and see what's going on.
Can you identify one object in this photo? You might be able to get hints of things you've seen before, and some areas might have a striking similarity to some vague thing deep in your memory, but I'd bet you can't name, with absolute certainty, a single object in this photo.
Nope.
Why is that? There has been much speculation about who or what made this image and what it was designed to do if it was designed at all. People have guessed it was made to simulate the experience of a stroke, nausea, anxiety, or to simply frustrate your brain. Unfortunately, these ideas have very little evidence behind them, and the evidence that is
The
there
entire
is
thing with this
anecdotal.
photo,
As for the
it looks
origin of
familiar
this
but completely
mysterious
foreign.
image, I did a bit of searching for myself. This image went semi-viral a few months ago on places like Twitter and Reddit. On Reddit, a user by the name MCSABAS posted the image with this caption. This picture is designed to give the viewer the simulated experience of having a stroke, particularly in the occipital lobe of the cerebral cortex, where visual perception occurs. Everything looks hauntingly familiar, but you
I think
just
that's
can't
just
quite
bullshit. This is
recognize
just an
it.
AI generated photo
Ooh,
for the kicks.
Mysterious. Science-y. But I wasn't going to just accept that
I think
on
that's
its own,
completely
of
bullshit.
course. So I
follow
messaged
pages that
MBAS
generate
and
AI
asked him about its
photos.
origin, which led me
You
to
give
an
them
earlier
keywords.
post. Now, to be fair to MBAS, he didn't just make up this caption. It was actually made up by another person, specifically a commenter underneath the earlier post. And MBAS did ask for a source for this claim, but unfortunately, no one answered. And later, the commenter admitted he made it up.
Yep.
MBAS also gave me an Instagram post that dates back to March 10th of last year,
So they
which
just
is
took
several weeks
unconfirmed
earlier than any of the
sources
other viral posts. The user Busy Rotting
and
is
just went with it.
responsible for this image,
Typical Reddit.
so they claim. And how did they make it? Well, by using a website called GANBreeder, now named ArtBreeder, a neural network that mixes multiple photos together to create images very similar to our viral pseudo-stroke simulation friend. Even though the origin of this image is less cool than viral claims made it out to be, I still think there's something to analyze here, even if it wasn't really designed.
This is an AI-generated photo.
What makes this image so frustrating to look at is the combination of similar textures, a lack of detail, and of course, the low resolution. Unlike other abstract works of art, this image seems to obey how a real photo would look. Yes, it's very flatly lit, but there's clearly a light source, appropriate shadows and shading to accompany that light source, and the forms seem to somewhat follow linear perspective. It's like a grotesque picture of a hoarder's bedroom, but everything is distorted ever so slightly so that nothing is recognizable. But unlike many other pictures in ArtBreeder's arsenal, at first glance it may look like an actual photo. It's in this weird middle ground between completely abstract and representational objects. The forms themselves are organic and random, but
kind of makes you uncomfortable though.
Scenery, it just looks like
you're trying to make sense of something that doesn't actually have any sense.
One user even attempted to reverse engineer what the image might have originally looked like without the AI distortion. Even though this image wasn't created in some kind of high-tech lab, you can't deny the anxious and frustrating effects that a lot of people seem to be sharing online when they view this image. It went viral for a reason. While most other AI images are quite easy to see as just complete nonsense, this image has this rare accidental quality that it seems so close to normal, but is just slightly
like everything in here at first glance kind of looks like a photograph, but
clip describes the effect quite well.
When analyzing it, it starts to bother you.
Sensation to almost recognize what something is, but I would imagine this is what looking at human things would look like to an alien. I want you to picture yourself, you're an alien, you visit Earth, and this is what objects look like to you. You can almost recognize it, but you just get stopped. Your brain puts together a couple things, but it's just not right. And that's why I think this is so fucking disturbing.
It also reminds me of the work of Ivan Seal and Leland Kirby.
It's almost there, but not quite. Oh, the caretaker. Oh no, this is gonna... If you guys don't know about the caretaker, this is gonna blow your mind.
The work of Ivan Seal cannot be discussed without the work of Leland Kirby, and vice versa. To put it simply, Ivan Seal is the artist behind the album covers for Kirby's music. In 2011, he had a gallery exhibition in Zurich, Switzerland titled The Object Hurts the Space, which showcased many of his simple yet baffling paintings. But they are put into a whole new perspective when paired with the music of the caretaker. If you don't know about the caretaker and his music, then be cautious in how you approach it, because his albums are probably one of the most depressing works of art
It will
I've
fuck with
ever
your head.
experienced. The Caretaker is a project by musician Leland Kirby, who took up the moniker as late as 1999 and finished just recently with his 6.5-hour collection of albums titled Everywhere at the End of Time. The Caretaker albums consist of old dance and ballroom records released anywhere between the 1920s and 1940s that have been slowed down, distorted, reverberated, and just screwed with in general, to produce an experience that explores memory and its deterioration. The average listener may view them as unpleasant and repetitive, and at many levels, that's the point. These albums specifically are not something that is exactly supposed to be enjoyed as regular music, but more like an experience.
Yep.
And even that experience is, of course, not going to be pleasant. And before you dismiss this as some lazy, inverted nightcore nonsense, I want to quickly make the case for it, and how, when paired with the album art, creates quite a profound artwork. First of all, it's not just hours and hours of nonsense. Well, not at first, at least. The way these old tracks and effects were brought together by this musician is very strategic, and is all meant to promote this sense of nostalgia and memory degeneration. The character.
I just want to comment on this. I heard that the album starts because there are 6 stages or 7 stages. In the earlier stages, most of the songs are quite pleasant and quite. I haven't heard it myself, but quite normal. They're supposed to invoke a very familial feeling of like retro songs on the radio, but as you progress through the stages, the songs become slowly more distorted, and it's supposed to invoke a feeling of like Alzheimer's or something, I think, where slowly when you get to stage 6, the familiar song has now been distorted so much and slowed so much that it is unbearable to listen to anymore, and it invokes a real sense of dread, because it seems like you're slowly forgetting what music actually sounds like anymore, and it just becomes like distorted noise. Apparently, it fucks with your mind. I don't think I dare listen to the complete album. I don't know if I'll come out the same, but it's super interesting.
Caretaker's most famous and probably most approachable albums is An Empty Bliss Beyond This World, with many tracks that are actually pleasant to listen to and less distortion than other albums comparatively. But even in this album, there was an exploration.
Is it Alzheimer's or dementia?
At one
of
point,
those.
the track Mental Caverns Without Sunshine appears twice, with a brief track in between, as if Kirby is trying to give the listener a sense of deja vu. In fact, the entire album was inspired by a study about how music can help Alzheimer's
It was
patients in
Alzheimer's,
remembering new information. This brings me back to the 6-hour project Everywhere at the End of Time. The project is comprised of 6 stages, each roughly 40 to 90 minutes, that explore dementia, its advancement, and its totality. The stages are described in detail in the descriptions of the video, but to summarize quickly, it starts off with slowed down dance records like An Empty Bliss, but eventually each stage gets more and more distorted, more and more unrecognizable, and eventually, in stage 6, it sounds like it ends, well, how dementia usually ends. Now, it would be unreasonable for me to ask someone to sit through 6 hours of depressing music, which for about half the time just sounds like this.
Basically, I think it's supposed to simulate.
But in order to really understand it,
would,
going from
normal
start
music
to
would sound like for a
finish with
dementia
no skipping is
riddled
really the only way to properly experience it. And don't worry, it has its payoffs. There's a certain part in the last 5 minutes that, Christ, it's just one of those things you can't describe. But once you hit it, you'll know what I'm talking about. This project would also never be complete without the album art. The works of Ivan Seal remind me especially about the kind of art breeder images I talked about earlier. They are objects with form and shadow, often resting in gradient voids, and some are more recognizable than others, but they all have this.
I would dare say I'm not afraid of horror games, but I would be very uncomfortable listening to this album.
Alien enough to keep you confused, like you're trying to remember something, but it just isn't clear enough. I don't think there's ever been artwork that fits the tone, message, and overall point of the music better than Ivan Seal's work with The Caretaker. Name a more iconic duo. I'll wait. And this would make sense, since Leland Kirby and Ivan Seal are longtime friends, and their visions probably overlap significantly. I don't like to be one of those people that are like, oh, if you don't appreciate artsy-fartsy stuff, you just don't get it. And I'm sure that albums outside of An Empty Bliss Beyond This World will be difficult for people to enjoy beyond a purely musical experience. And that's fine.
That's actually
but
really
I have
accurate.
To make an argument
It's a musical
that there's
experience
more
more
going
than
on here
anything.
besides slowing down cheap 1930s records. There's a collection of multiple elements and an immersion and atmosphere to things like this 6-hour project that have to be appreciated as a whole. It's a challenge, honestly. Listening to 6 hours straight of haunting music in a day, experiencing the decay and eventual death of a person in audio form, is not something I'd like to go
Quite
through
literally,
again.
yeah.
But once you go through it, you're a changed person. This idea
That's what I'm
that
afraid
art
of.
has the capacity to simulate
I'm afraid they
different
might fuck with
mental
my
issues
mind.
that normally people would not be able to experience without all the long-term effects is something that has caught my attention recently. I think there could be something of an intersection between AI, human mental experiences, and how future art could simulate those experiences in a much more profound way than before, perhaps with AI assistance. Artificial intelligence has made some progress throughout the years, and the capacity to form new and interesting art has expanded, including some
Damn.
machine learning projects such as Google's Magenta and Deep Dream, and the more accessible NVIDIA project, which can create some convincing landscapes in seconds. It may come as a temporary comfort to human artists that so far most AI art is kind of unpleasant to look at, but I don't think that comfort will last for long. Contrary to popular belief, drawing and painting has rules and fundamentals if you are trying to create a faithful recreation of reality and to some extent a stylistic version of reality. There's objective science to lighting and form. You can measure perspective using grids and mathematics. You can determine whether
that's
something
true.
looks like it can exist
all
in a 3D
regards.
space or whether
It still
it
needs
can't.
to-
The purely technical realm of art is just as much a skill as
Yeah. It
constructing
still
a
needs to obey
structurally
the
stable
laws of
building.
physics of the real world if you're trying to represent the real
Artificial
world.
intelligence in the future will have the capacity to outperform humans in art on a technical, objective level. And when that happens, we may still have abstraction, stylization, and emotional resonance to keep artists afloat for a few more decades. But when AI eventually gets so good that we aren't able to distinguish human art from computer art, I don't even know what's going to happen. You may argue that AI right now is just taking artwork and photos from humans and blending them together, and they aren't really making anything new. But that's what human artists do anyway. You could argue about how AI is not truly independent from human interference, and that opens up a whole other can of worms. But one thing is for sure, humans can't be born into a void and paint a human, or an animal,
Yeah, it's
or a
based off
plant.
experience.
You can only paint void. You don't have anything to reference. Without anything to call back to,
Based
you
off your
can't
memories and
make
experience.
anything. Certainly not anything new. We are our memories. And that brings me back to
Profound.
Ivan Seal and the Caretaker. What this project makes you realize is how important memories are, and how devastating losing them will be. I don't think I've ever heard a more accurate depiction of death in audio form than the last 5 minutes of Everywhere at the End of Time. But I'm just guessing.
I'm too
Even
afraid to
Leland
listen to
Kirby
it.
Is guessing. I won't be able to know if that's how dementia sounds, if that makes any sense, until I'm actually experiencing it. But I think the incredible emotional resonance it has on people should count for something, especially for those on the outside looking in, so to speak.
I mean, just read
I've
those
showed you
comments.
2 examples of art that
People
seems
come
to
out
simulate mental disorders.
different.
One made as an accident using AI, and one made with deep intention. This brings me to this question. Can art be used in a practical way to help people with mental disorders? Not only with a more profound understanding of those disorders, but also, like in the 2010 study, as a way to improve those disorders.
I think yes.
Of course, art has been used for hundreds of years to give greater understanding to concepts that written language could have a much more difficult time explaining. You can't describe the color red in words very effectively. But projects like The Caretaker, I feel, are getting closer and closer to creating immersive, detailed experiences that cannot be achieved by a
Auditory
singular
experiences.
painting. That 6-hour
Visual
runtime
stimulus.
is not something that could be achieved easily without the internet. I doubt many people are going to sit around at a physical place without any pausing or breaks to get the same experience. But that runtime is absolutely necessary to give detail and realism to the gradual decline one may go through during dementia and memory loss. Deep meditation is harder to achieve without a lot of time. Visual and audio art could give insights into the experiences of other people without the long-term effects of those specific mental states. And I think the more detailed,
Oh man,
the
that's
more
so
immersive
haunting.
that art gets, the closer we can get to understanding each other in a more profound way. A lot of conflict stems from miscommunication, and if we can bridge those gaps with tools like art, we might also be able to improve our world significantly. I am really young to be thinking about the kinds of things the Caretaker Project presents, but
too, me
its messages
too.
are devastating, and there's one message that stands out to me very clearly. We are all running out of time.
That is so depressing to think about, but true at the same time. Man, this album is something else. I'm actually afraid of listening to it. Crazy. Thank you, Solar Sounds. I enjoyed that. Yikes. I was so shocked to see a Reddit user actually admit to lying. Yeah, that is a first. Yeah, everything sounds so familiar, yet it doesn't mean anything.